Hey guys, so I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about a meme within devs or ShortFatOtaku's community. So if you're not aware, I've talked about dev before. In fact, the last time I talked about dev, it was actually my biggest video of all time until recently. Now, to be fair, I do have more subscribers now, but the fact that that video got over 2,000 views is kind of insane to me. Because that was an order of magnitude, 2 orders of magnitude almost, larger than like my subscriber count at the time. It kind of annoyed me because I don't want my whole channel to be about just like making fun of Dev. Because, I mean, he's a very easy target to make fun of. But anyways, there is a meme within his community that many of you may have noticed. And if you go to his like Discord or you go on his videos, you might not see the meme pop up. But if you go on any like comment section where he was discussed or involved, you'll see like comments saying trucker video win. Now that's a reference back to like the COVID-19 days. And what it came about is that's when dev started to go like legitimately insane. So during that time period, a bunch of the truckers in Canada started protesting against the COVID lockdowns, among other things, in regards to how the government was handling the whole situation. And it was a very peaceful like protest. It made Trudeau look absolutely awful. He was completely out of his depth, and like, well, as the protests were ongoing, it was making it harder and harder for him to like keep up his image. Not that he had much of an image at that time anyways. He was basically seen as very weak, unable to stand up to Trump, and the fact that he was even trying to stand up to Trump in the first place while like his government was trying to ban hunting rifles. And they said up and down the line that no, they weren't trying to ban hunting rifles until like one of the conservative leaders read off the entire list of guns that were going to be banned by the law. And it obviously included hunting rifles. So they were outright lying at the time. Now the COVID lockdowns were messing up a lot of stuff. It was really messing up the economy and making it very hard for people to work. So the truckers started to protest, rightfully so. And like I said, it was peaceful protests, like legitimately peaceful protests. Not peaceful but fiery, where people were actually burning down entire cities, but actually peaceful. Well, Trudeau couldn't have that because it made him look bad. So he started to have everyone arrested that was involved. And not only that, they were using a law to shut down everyone's bank account who was involved with the protests. So they couldn't feed their families. They were cut off entirely from their own money. And this was also during a time when people couldn't really work in a lot of industries across the country. It was incredibly messed up because not only were people not allowed to make new money, but they weren't even allowed to access their old money that they actually earned, that they saved up. These weren't like people threatening to bomb local government buildings or anything. These were people who were just upset with the government for forcing their businesses to shut down and making it very hard for them to do their jobs. And Dev decided to take the absolutely enlightened stance that this was all necessary, that it was completely necessary to arrest all these people, to shut down the protests, to cut off their money supply, to make sure they couldn't feed their families, both due to work not being allowed to even occur, and then shutting off people's bank accounts so they couldn't, use their own money to afford food or pay their bills. He took the most insane, absolutely off the wall position possible on it. And this is where a lot of people realized what kind of person Dev was. And he had promised to make a video discussing all the reasons and the logic and why it was necessary to arrest these people. While they weren't arresting, you know, actually violent criminals or violent, like, rioters. He promised that he would have that video out, and then he would prove to the world, to all his fans, that this was a totally necessary action by Trudeau's government. Well, the video never came out. He never made it. And I don't know if he just got lazy, he just like lost his interest in the subject, or if he actually looked into it and realized that he was completely and utterly wrong and was afraid to admit his mistake. So he would just keep saying that, oh, I'll make it eventually, while having absolutely no intention to do so. Again, people were basically just saying that he promised to make this video to justify this unjustifiable action by the Trudeau's government, and he kept putting it off, to the point where it's been like, 3 years now since those protests? Something like that. It might even be longer than that, and he never made that video. And again, I think it was just because the optics of that stance was so utterly insane that he just knew that he couldn't do it because it would like destroy his reputation. Maybe that's giving him too much credit. Maybe he's just lazy. I mean, it is what it is. And like, people love making fun of him about it. In fact, if you try to say anything about it inside his comment sections, inside his videos, or if you go on his Discord to like mention it, or you go onto his streams and say it in the streams, you'll get banned by both him and the monitors. Like, he'll completely ignore you and you'll be banned permanently from ever speaking again. That's just the kind of person he is, that he cannot take any criticism whatsoever, and he'll just shut down discussion and make up a bunch of excuses. Like he did with me when I mentioned to him on Twitter X that, hey, you promised to debate me, and like, you didn't go through with your promise. And he just said, I have no idea who this guy is. Yeah, you don't remember me because you completely ignored me for like a year and a half, and you never messaged me even though you had my contact information. Dev is a coward. He is definitely a coward in many ways. He will not, he does not follow through with his promises. He lies to his audience, promising to do something when he has no intention to actually do it. And if anyone ever calls him out on it, he'll just have them banned, so they can never speak to him again. That's just the kind of person he is. Now, during that time period, both Canada and the United States was treating the truckers really terribly. So, I guess I should go on and talk about... I know a little bit more about the trucker situation inside of America. Instead of, like, truckers going onto a nationwide protest and, like, being arrested en masse for peaceful protesting and having their bank accounts shut down, the situation in America was very different. And during COVID, a lot of ships were come in, I mean, during any time of the year, shipping cargo containers, God dang it. Big freighters with a lot of shipping containers come through and dock in California, especially along Los Angeles, to drop off a lot of goods that come overseas from places like China, India, and all locations like that. Now, on average, at the time, there was 110 ships coming in every month in January of I think 2022. I looked it up. I might be wrong on that year, but around COVID time in January there was 109 cargo ships that came through, and many months later there were only 4 per week coming through, is what my understanding was. So there was like 17 to 18 ships actually coming to California during that time. Now, there were a lot of reasons for this. A lot, like why it was so backed up and congested. But you have to keep in mind that during this time, a lot of small businesses were shut down and not allowed to open. And there was this one business owner in California who owned a restaurant. And the basic outline of what they were supposed to do is that they were supposed to have outdoor seating available, and people were not allowed to eat indoors because they would be too close together or whatever. Total excuse, by the way. Well, she went out and she set up outdoor seating at her restaurant and then asked permission from the government to reopen. And they refused her. No reason was given, just that she was not allowed to reopen, despite the fact that she had gone without business for so long that she was on the verge of bankruptcy, and she just wanted to be able to conduct business, because you still have to pay taxes, and if you're renting out the place, you still have to pay rent. Now, some states shut it down so that, like, people didn't have to pay rent during COVID, but that meant that the people who own the buildings who had to pay taxes weren't getting their money for the buildings, and therefore they would have to sell their buildings off and the business would go up. Like, the store that was in that building would have to go out of business anyways, because suddenly the bank is seizing the assets and they don't have a deal with the actual business that's in there. It was rough for everybody all around. But when she set up the outdoor seating, she was denied the privilege, the right to reopen her business. Meanwhile, a pretty big, like, film studio or like producing company came out and set up an outdoor, like, banquet in her parking lot. And they were allowed to operate like that. Why? I have to assume it's because they pay more taxes, or maybe because they just straight up bribed the government or the politicians to allow that to go through. Now, granted, that was a temporary event. It wasn't going to last forever. But they were allowing people to gather to eat outside in the parking lot while not allowing the small business owner, like 20 feet away, to open up her business to do the same thing. I was watching the video where she was explaining that whole situation, and she sounds absolutely distraught. Like, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. It made no sense in the slightest. And it was absolutely insane what they were doing. Well, while the COVID lockdowns were going on, what happened is that California decided that this was the perfect opportunity to also implement some of the policies that they wished to get through. Now, there were a lot of reasons why everything was so congested, but one of the main reasons was that California's government would only allow trucks to pick up cargo if they met certain requirements on their fuel economy. And that meant that every truck that had an engine built before 2010 was not allowed to pick up any cargo. And even engines made after 2010, from my understanding, were also not allowed to pick cargo up unless they could get a certain amount of miles per gallon. And this was during COVID, where a lot of people weren't working. There were shortages everywhere, especially along toilet paper, because everyone decided to go buy up every roll that was available. And that drove up prices because supply suddenly crashed through the floor. And then buried itself deep within the Earth's crust. Well, during this time, obviously truckers are trying to do their job and make sure that much needed supplies and merchandise is transported all over the country. And California decided that this was the perfect opportunity to make sure that it was impossible for 90% plus of trucks to be unable to pick up any merchandise whatsoever. And the trucks were just stuck there. The cargo ships were just stuck there for months and months and months, trying to work out a deal with California's government. So while Biden's federal administration was making life absolutely miserable for the entire country, while California's government, Gavin Newsom's government, was trying to add as much fuel to the fire as humanly possible to make the disaster as wide-reaching and devastating as humanly possible. Eventually, after much needed paperwork, after many, many months of trying to sort things out, the cargo ships were finally cleared to leave California, to go through the Panama Canal, to go to Texas, Louisiana, and Florida to drop off their cargo instead. Which means the truckers that had been waiting there for months, if they were silly enough to believe that California's government would ever see any reason whatsoever, would now have to drive halfway across the country to get more work. All you can do is laugh, man, because the only other thing you can do is cry. It's just like, it's no wonder that so many people have just outright abandoned California, especially the major cities, because not only are they absolutely filthy, where the homeless population is through the roof, and there's not like outhouses all over the city, and oftentimes businesses won't let people use their restrooms unless they're a customer. So people just instead squat down on the street and release all their waste right there. Because what else are they going to do? They're homeless. They can't afford the rent prices. A lot of them are so depressed and hopeless that they just are blitzed on drugs, because a lot of drugs are just legal now in California, because they didn't want to punish the poor, so they just allowed drugs to flood the street, to the point where they put drug paraphernalia in vending machines, in free vending machines, where you don't have to pay for anything. And the vending machines are broken open and everything taken out of them anyways, even though the stuff in there is free. Because people will just turn around and sell it for an actual price, besides free. Jeez. It's insane. Like, both the Democrats, both on the federal and state level, had the entire country in a stranglehold grip, making it very difficult for grocery stores across the nation to get any merchandise into the store. And it would take months still, maybe. I don't know if they ever actually fixed it. Honestly, I don't know if they actually abolished that law. Because truckers who own vehicles made before 2010 just simply said, screw it, we're going to go to a state that actually allows us to do our job. You do not, under any circumstance, want to make life hard for the people that bring you your food, the people that bring you your toiletries. Like truckers are such a vital part of the logistics operation of a nation. And mass arresting them or making it impossible for the grand majority of them to do any business whatsoever absolutely, completely, and utterly annihilated the economy. That was a big reason why Trump won in the first place. is because the Democrats had gone completely insane. Because even when they ended those policies, those lockdown policies, they weren't allowing businesses to rebuild. They weren't giving them any incentives or any compensation for what had happened to their businesses. Businesses were just permanently dead. People who had started small businesses just completely gave up hope of ever being able to fix the situation. That even after all those policies were ended, they just thought to themselves, no, I can't afford to do this again. I can't go through the stress of having to do this again in case they ever pull crap like this on us ever again. It was horrific. I mean, there are people still on the streets to this day homeless because they fell into a spiral due to those horrible policies, and they were dug so deep into a hole that they still have not been able to get out of it. And it's all the Democrats' fault. I mean, in some cases, it's also the Republicans' fault for not fighting more against it. Even some of the most conservative states in the Union had at least some lockdown and COVID response measures. And to be fair, if it was actually only for the 2 weeks, it still would have hurt the economy, but it wouldn't have been the absolute horrific disaster that it turned out to be. And I bet you anything that if you would ask Dev nowadays, he would defend those policies as well, saying that they were absolutely necessary due to the amount of people that died. And you have to keep in mind that while they were counting COVID deaths, part of it was people who died with COVID. There were situations where people happened to have COVID, but because they were shot, they were listed as having died of COVID. Now, that would be self-inflicted gunshot wounds. If it was a violent crime or something like that, that was harder to explain away. That's an extreme example, but there were people who died of cancer because their immune systems were weak, and it was blamed on COVID. At the same time, the government stopped tracking how many people died of the flu. And you have to keep in mind that a lot of people die from the flu. It was to a point where it was becoming very obvious that a lot of hospitals and urgent cares or other medical facilities that dealt with sick patients were blaming the deaths on COVID when the death was something having to do with the flu or existing health issues going on. And they were doing that because the federal government was giving more money and more resources to medical facilities that had more COVID deaths. So they would just skewer the numbers a little bit, inflate the number of COVID deaths so that they would get more help from the government. And that's why the COVID death count is inflated massively. In a similar fashion on how the COVID deaths in China are massively underestimated. They listed as having a few thousand COVID deaths, and then after a while they just stopped counting them, and then it was just stuck at 3,000 or something absolutely insane like that, wherein the death toll was probably at least 1 million people. And then they tried to blame COVID on the United States as well. I'm not going to talk about the whole lab theory. I mean, I got my opinion on that as well, but you can just see just how absolutely insane the whole situation was. But anyways, I'm going to leave it at there. Again, Dev's a coward. He defended these policies, these absolutely horrific policies. And he will continue to do it too, no matter how many people it hurts. And yeah, that trucker video is never coming out. He's never going to be able to justify that to anyone, that it was necessary. So, leave it at there. Bye, guys.